Welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. That's me. I have been privileged to serve as your host for nearly 7 years. Goodness, close to 500 episodes where every Tuesday and Friday, sponsored by the Franklin Covey Company, I've had the privilege of interviewing and conversing and learning from many of the world's most renowned influencers, experts, people that are pouring into you, our listeners and viewers and subscribers, to make you a better leader, formally, informally, professionally, personally. Franklin Covey, of course, known worldwide as the world's most trusted leadership firm, founded in part by Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. On Tuesdays and Fridays, we interview academics, researchers, scientists, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, solopreneurs, wannapreneurs, people of all ages and cultures and races and education and nationality that have done something remarkable to make your life more effective. We've interviewed people that have suffered and recovered from amazing tragedies and have summoned the courage to teach through them. And then there are practitioners, business leaders like today's guests that have insights from their own organization's mission and research and membership to help you learn something new or do something different. Our guest today is Debra Whitman. She is associated with AARP, of which I'm a proud member at the age of 56, and is the author of the new book, The Second 50, Answers to the 7 Big Questions of Midlife and Beyond. Debra wrote this book for me. I hope you will find some great resonance in it as well. Debra Whitman, welcome to On Leadership.
Thanks, Scott. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you're not in your second 50, so I'm not sure how you are qualified to write this book.
Why, yes, I am. I'm a proudly 54.
Well,
and I wrote it because I had a lot of questions, even though I've worked on aging my whole career.
Well, you look fantastic, darling. Let's start with why you wrote this book and who you are. Will you rewind a couple of decades and talk about your own journey, your role with AARP, and why this became a book you had to write?
Well, I'll start with why I work on aging, and that's because I grew up living with my grandmother. My mother was her caregiver. My grandmother had schizophrenia, but she and I had a really close relationship. And so I was always influenced by, having this cross-generational relationship and seeing the value of somebody in my life. I'm from a tiny little town in Washington State, Electric City, population 900. Went to Gonzaga and then wanted to study in another country. And I realized I could do that if I had economics as a major. So that's why I'm an economist, is because I wanted to live in Florence for a year. Got my PhD in economics at Syracuse, went to work at the Social Security Administration. Then I was on Capitol Hill for about a decade doing healthcare, and then finally running the Senate Aging Committee. And then I've been here at AARP for over a decade, where I lead our research, our public policy work, our global thought leadership, and brain health work.
Has there been a more qualified person to talk about this topic than you? There has not. Okay, I mentioned to you off air, every 100 or so episodes, I will use an author's table of contents as the structure for our conversation because it makes sense. Although this is not a book review podcast, many of our guests have books, and so we use the insights from their books to drive our questions. So you have written an 8-chapter book, and here's how it flows. In order: how long will I live? Will I be healthy? Will I lose my memory? How long will I work? Will I have enough money? No. Well, where will I live? How will I die? And then finally, a better second 50. We're going to go through each of these in equal parts. We're going to pivot and take a little bit longer time on chapter 4, which is how long will I work? Because that will be so interesting to a lot of our guests. Let's divide our time and let's do a kind of one long speed round. Take as long as you need in these chapters, right? We've got plenty of time, but I'd like to take the opportunity to pitch each of these topics to you and then just have you riff on them. Like I mentioned, we'll take a little longer on the 4th chapter, how long will I live? Okay, let's start in order. Chapter number 1, how long will I work? Chapter 1, how long will I live? We know this is longer and longer. There is a massive amount of education and research on epigenetics and our origin stories and how to live healthier lives, and exercise and balance, and decelerating the onset of mental illness. You say what? How long are we going to live?
So the first thing I want to be clear, I am not a fortune teller. I do not have everybody's birth and death dates in the book. But what I talk about is both the fact that we've increased our life expectancy by about 30 years since the 1900s. Before 1900, you could barely expect to live to 50. After that, now we're living mostly until our 80s. And the drivers of that is a little piece genetics. If you ask somebody how long they're going to live, they'll probably tell you how long their parents or grandparents or other relatives have lived. And that's about 20% of your longevity. But the big drivers are what's called the social determinants of health, or social drivers of health. And those are things like your education. People with a higher education live 7 years longer. Your income, people at the top 1% of wealth live more than a decade longer than people at the bottom. Where you live, the geography is now more of your destiny. So your zip code predicts your life expectancy more than your genetic code. And so we have states and counties with 20-year differences across this country. So those types of things have a huge effect on how long we're going to live. And I should also say women live about 6 years longer in the United States than men. And that's due to both our biology and the fact that you men sometimes skip going to the doctors when you should.
Things we have heard before, but so helpful to have reinforced. Okay, where should we live? What zip code should I live in if I want to live the longest? Everything else being equal.
Summit County, Colorado, Breckenridge. It's high altitude, so I don't know if that oxygen helps you. I've also been told by some people that live in Summit County that people who get sick move down to Denver, so that might be increasing it. But you really want to live in a place that invests in health. So some researchers have found that some of the drivers for when we get disease and how early we die can be really controlled by the policies of the state. So the differences between West Virginia and Minnesota are about more than 15 years later, in which you get your more chronic conditions, and that's due to investments in healthcare, education, higher taxes on smoking, all of those types of things. So we can help people to live longer, and people can help themselves to live longer. There's a lot we can do as well. I'm happy to talk about that.
Well, the book is riveting right on this. I mean, it's just such a great resource. If you want to change your life, if you want to live longer, this is the manual. Topic 2, will I be healthy?
So unfortunately, we're adding more years, but not all healthy years. So in the 2000s, although we have seen life expectancy drop slightly even before the pandemic, we added about 2 years of life expectancy, but only a few months of what we call health span, the number of years that we're healthy. And so, people want to live longer, but they also want to live longer with autonomy and with good health. And so here's a couple things people can do to live longer and healthier. They won't be super shocking when I go through the list, but it's things like exercising, eating right, maintaining your body weight, not smoking, and not drinking too much. If you do that, you can gain about a decade of life expectancy. But even one habit can gain you a couple years. But Scott, those are things that we can do. Our mindset also really matters, as well as our relationships. So if you think that aging is a positive time, not a time of decline, you live 7.5 years longer. you actually are healthier, you have lower risk of heart disease, and even the volume of your brain, when they looked at people's brains after they had died, and then looked back to see whether they had a positive view or negative view decades earlier, the brain volume was higher based on our beliefs. The last thing I'll say, and because you mentioned I know you've had Bob Waldinger on your show, is the power of relationships. So if you want to live a longer and healthier life, having good quality relationships really matters. And Bob Waldinger's done one of the longest studies of people throughout their life. And he looked at healthy 80-year-olds and he said, okay, well, what was different about them in their 50s that made them different than the unhealthy 80-year-olds? And he looked at cholesterol and exercise. And what he really found was the quality of relationships for those healthy 80-year-olds was much, much higher. So have friends, think positively about aging, do healthy habits, all of those things we have in our own control.
It's such an interesting conversation. My mother is 83, generally good health, complete sanity, and financial resources. She could live, for 50 more years. And my mother wants to live for 3 or 4 more years. That's it. She's actually said it. She's a fairly positive person because, her body is starting to break down, right? And with knee replacements and things like that. And she's had, broken leg and the swelling and the icing and the therapy and the hospital and all PT. She's been quite pragmatic. She says, I don't want to live that much longer because the quality of life is actually kind of consuming for her. And she's in great mental health and great financial health. It's actually been kind of sobering to me to realize, how long do you want to live as long as your quality of life is such that it's enjoyable, to your point. Let's go to the third one. Will I lose my memory? Some interesting statistics on the increase versus the decline in people that have, mental health and memory issues. Talk about that.
Yeah, so half of us worry that we're going to lose our memory, but really the odds are much, much lower. It's only about 17%. It's much higher for African American, especially African American women, but it's nowhere near sort of the fear that people have. And so a couple of things I talk about is the need to maintain our brain health and actually invest in reducing the risk that we'll have cognitive decline and dementia. So many of those things I just talked about that help you live longer also help our brain, but as does things like sleep and keeping our brains sharp by using it. Those things can really help us to maintain our brain health. I think I tried to talk to people throughout this. I did surveys, but I also really tried to interview people that were going through the issues that, I'm going to look forward to as I age. And one of the most powerful conversations was with a woman that was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And she helped me see that, even for those that have that terrible and scary diagnosis, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't get a diagnosis and then you can't remember anything the next day. There's a process by which you still have some capacities and you still have some abilities to connect with others. And so I really encourage people to, if they see anything that might be scary to them, to talk to their doctor, because while it could be cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, it could also be a vitamin deficiency. Or my dad last year was seeing trees growing out of a wall, and it turned out it was some medication that he was taking. And once he got off that, he regained all cognitive ability. And so making sure that you do what you can to maintain your health, and then get it checked if you have any concerns.
Debra, why are Black women more at risk for cognitive decline than other populations?
Oh, really good question. I don't know if I have the full answer. African American women also have much shorter life expectancies. They face a lot more stressors across their life, particularly if you think of older Black women today and what they've gone through over the last 70, 80 years. Less access to good health care, higher areas of things like air pollution and other things that can also increase our risks.
Right. It may be more concentrated in urban areas with not quality foods or shopping for groceries and clean water and things like that too, I can imagine as well. So thank you for that. Let's belabor this next one, the fourth section of your book, How Long Will I Work? This is a leadership podcast where we talk about health and wellness and personal legacies and marketing and operations, you name it. But this will be interesting to all those who are joining us because of their work identities. What do we need to know about this? How long will I work?
So let me talk about it from the individual perspective first. A lot of people are working later and later for two different reasons. And there's sort of very different decisions in populations. One, they love their job. They have a good job. The job wants to keep them. They feel passionate about it. It's part of their sense of purpose. It's part of their sense of connection. Your family at work, all of those things make people want to stay working longer. The other is I really don't have the money, I didn't save enough, and Social Security isn't enough for me to live on, and I need to keep working. And those are I've heard from both people on both sides of the equation, and particularly those that have to work and are in physically demanding jobs or face difficult finding new jobs because of their age and age discrimination in the workplace. It's a real challenge. We're seeing more and more people go into the gig economy. 40% of Uber drivers are over age 50. And so people are trying to, add a little extra money wherever they can through work. Let me talk a little bit about the employer side, because you have a lot of HR professionals. And we've done a whole bunch of work looking at the fact that for the first time in human history, we've got 5 generations working together. And this is really exciting because when we survey workers, they like working with other generations. And when we dig into the data, we actually find that mixed age teams are more productive than ones that have less age diversity. So, in the similar way that we see gender and race and ethnicity diversity can increase the productivity of a team, increased age diversity also can be a real strength for the workforce. And it also helps because so many of people's clients and customers are also aging, and having that sense of your workers matching your customers is always important as well.
Next topic, gird your loins, people. Will I have enough money?
Yeah, so this is one too that's going to depend on the first couple questions. How long you live, will you be healthy, and will you lose your memory? All will play into how much money you need as you age. And the assets you have. So I talk a lot about how our retirement system isn't really a great foundation for many people. Only half of workers in the United States are even offered the chance to save for retirement through their paycheck. So, because employers can decide to offer a 401k or a 403b or other types of retirement savings program, there's a lot that don't. And particularly in small businesses, people fall through those cracks. We know that Social Security is facing a long-term solvency problem. It is not going bankrupt, but there will not be, about 2035, enough money to pay full benefits for people that are either retired or surviving spouses or people with disabilities. And so we really need Congress to act and to make sure that that program is solvent and adequate for future generations. And then pensions, the gold watches and things that our parents used to have, where you get a paycheck from your employer for years, those have just fallen off cliffs, being replaced by the retirement savings programs that we have. So people are struggling to make all of those things add up. in order to pay their bills. And that's why work is actually becoming one of the key pillars of our retirement system.
I mean, it's so complicated too, right? I mean, my father had a pension, and my mother still draws upon my father's pension. My father has passed, but he worked for a large military contractor. But just, all the policy issues have a huge impact, who you vote for. And if you think about the economy more holistically around how much responsibility really is now placed on you individually, perhaps as it should, some may think, and others may think differently. But my mother lives in a retirement community, fortunately, and I think her monthly nut, if you will, for the place is about $6,500. That includes her rent and her meals and electricity and things like that. And when you factor in, cable and parking, it's probably closer to $7,000. But she knows people in the building that are in memory care. And they've got one that's maybe on the assisted floor, spending $7,000-8,000 a month, and the person in the memory care spending $10,000-12,000 a month. I mean, you're looking at $16,000, $18,000, $19,000 for two spouses in their late 70s, early 80s. I mean, that's not an unusual scenario, is it?
No, and as you say, memory care and long-term care are incredibly expensive. It's over $80,000 a year for long-term care and memory care. I was talking to several people that are spending $200,000 a year, and that didn't even include incontinence care. So they had to hire extra help on top of the $200,000. So, as I think about where will I live, it's not just, is my house gonna be some place that I can stay in? And, my house has stairs, so probably not. But also, what's gonna happen when I need some extra help? Most people think that Medicare pays for that extra help, but it only pays for short periods after a major hospital stay. And so most of that falls on either the individual, their family, or people spend down everything they own to qualify for Medicaid. And that's a state-based program that helps provide long-term care for people. It's moving towards providing more care in people's homes, which is where people want to stay. But that's not a mandatory service.
Yeah, it's sobering, is it not? I've told my wife many times, if you're really responsible, it's overwhelming in terms of what you need to prepare for what's likely going to happen. It's hard to function if you are like take a sober look at it, because it can wash over you. Okay, happier. Number 6, where will I live? Talk about that.
So we were just talking a little bit about that of how important is your home, and is it a home that will fit your body? Unfortunately, we still build most houses as we did in the 1960s for the family with kids. So I have a split level, and I never thought it was a problem until my father-in-law's 94-year-old girlfriend came over.
Wait, what? Wait, what? That's awesome.
Yeah, no, she was amazing. But she looked at these 6 stairs as if it was Mount Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
And I realized, this is going to be a problem. And then my husband had some knee surgery, and he also has struggled up those 6 stairs. So most of our houses, in fact, just a small fraction, like 5% in this country, are fully accessible. And if we think about it, it's not just a problem for older people not being able to find a house that they can live in. It's a problem for us that want to have our parents over for Thanksgiving. And if they're in a wheelchair, you can't come to my house, unfortunately. It's just not designed for that. So we need to think differently, and this is a great place for businesses to invest, and that's why many retirement communities are popping up, because they are better designed for our aging body and our mobility needs.
I'm just so delighted that your dad has a 94-year-old girlfriend, and her biggest challenge were the 6 stairs in your house. Good for him, good for her. Okay,
yeah,
next.
Now he and Flo found love in assisted living, which we were thrilled about.
We've heard about that, but we won't go there. We heard what goes on there. So anyway, good for them. Okay, a little more morose. How will I die? Okay, bring it to us.
So this was my most interesting chapter to write, I'll say, because I knew so little of it. And also it was hard to find basic information. My husband had the, I would say, honor of being with both his father and mother when they passed away, but I had never seen anybody die. And so I interviewed a palliative care nurse, and I asked her sort of what are the signs. And of course, nobody's all the same, but understanding the sort of things that the body goes through. I also talk a little bit in the chapter. One of the most fun parts of my job is I get to study how other countries are aging. And I went to New Zealand, where I met with a group of older people that decorate their own coffins. It's a part social club, it's part arts and crafts, but the Kiwi Coffin Club brings together men and women who decorate their coffins. One did an Elvis, one did some hikes that she had been on in beautiful places around New Zealand.
The inside, the inside or the outside of the coffin?
Both,
Oh, okay.
actually.
All right.
Most of the painting was on the outside, but they could line it with different materials based on their preferences. So,
Who knew? Who knew the
they had
Kiwi
stencils
Coffin
and-
Club existed, right?
They were really fun.
I'll bet. Let's end on a great note. The last part of your book is all about how do you have a better second 50, right? You kind of sober us up and prepare us for all the facts and likelihoods of what we're going to face after 50, and then you talk about what's better. Leave us with some words of encouragement.
Well, I'll just tell you what I do in my day job, and that is try and fill all the holes that we have in our system to make aging easier. So, all of the things that I talked about, it's just not easy to age well in America. And in fact, our life expectancy is lower than that of other developed countries. So we could be doing more. Things like making sure we have enough geriatricians, people that are experts in our bodies as we age. We have a huge shortage in this country. Or looking at Medicare and making sure it covers our eyes, our teeth, and our ears, 3 things that age with the rest of us, but for some reason we're not covered. We need to do things like make sure everybody can save for retirement. And luckily, we've gotten 20 states to be starting plans for workers whose employer doesn't offer them a plan. So those are a few of the ideas, but more importantly, it's that we need to think about demographic change in the same way we're thinking about climate change and hopefully thinking about AI, that it's going to transform our society. It's going to change the face literally, both because of wrinkles and some gray hairs, but it's going to really transform our workplaces, our housing, our healthcare systems. But we really haven't been talking about it enough. We really haven't been planning enough for us as individuals and as a country, and we need to do that better.
Talk about a mission-centered career and job. Debra Whitman, Dr. Debra Whitman, your new book out, The Second 50, Answers to the 7 Big Questions of Midlife and Beyond. For anybody who's looking for a book to buy your parents, your in-laws, your leader who's retiring, whatever the situation is, what a fantastic book. I mean, it's a very inspiring book. You talk about some very sobering issues as well, but the whole book has a very positive and kind of roadmap theme to it as well. Excellent work. Thanks for joining us today, Debra. Lovely spotlighting your book and talking with you today. And as I head home, my wife and I still have some planning to do. We have 3 young boys, so lots of tuition ahead of us. There's always the balance between launching the college-educated kids and also making sure that we're set for what could be, a very, I use the word sobering because that's the only word I can think of, sobering future, to make sure that we're healthy and safe. So appreciate your time and your dedication today.
Thanks, Scott, for having me.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.